Hey guys, my name is Harsh Muhammad and welcome to this video. And in this video, we'll be trying to systematically understand the nature, the causes, how it's widespread, and how we can tackle fake news. If you are not aware already, fake news is a very pressing issue these days, and if it's not already, it's going to be a bigger issue in the future with a lot of technologies like deep fakes and with political polarization becoming a pressing issue every day. Fake news is going to be a bigger issue than it is today, actually. So we'll try to understand what it is systematically. So what I mean by systematically is that we'll not try to understand any one specific cause in detail, but we will understand different elements in the system in conjunction with the context. Okay, so that we understand how it sort of fits into the whole system of fake news. All right, so when we talk about fake news, we often think about distortion of facts. But actually, that's not all there is. Because if you think about it, what I mean by distortion of facts is straight up lies and deception. So if somebody just told you that, 10 people, 5 people died instead of 10 people died, technologies these days are actually using different technologies able to detect, okay, this is fake news. So there are ways to get around it. Distortion of facts is not all that there is to fake news. In fact the biggest problem is actually the second one, which is incomplete and inconsistent stories, which is not easy to solve, and it's also not the kind of problem which a lot of people seem to be concerned about. Okay, so where does deception and distortion of facts always lead us to? It always leads us to a breaking point. What that means is that every lie always breaks down. And that's what I mean here, the last year system breakdown by itself. It's the most common destination for a lie. So what do I mean by that? Now you would have come across so many situations in your life where you told a lie and you got away with it, right? And and that's actually not something that is excluded from breaking point. Every lie, even that point, also will break down at one point, and I'll explain how. So a lie is exposed through a different ways, right? One is through whistleblowing. So if you're in a group and somebody thinks that it's just too much to bear, and you're doing something that's terrible to the people under you, then somebody would just think, okay, this is too much. It's becoming too much to bear, so I'm gonna get out of the system, and then they exit the system, and then that's called whistleblowing. Somebody just tells the truth to everybody out there. And we also have witness, which is that, it's the most common. I mean, it's the most simple thing. It's somebody just saw you or somebody heard something, and that's just witness. You also have education and enlightenment, which is that, there has been a thing that's going on, a practice that's going on, and people think, this is wrong, right? So education and enlightenment is a phase where you are going through the literature, and you think this is just straight up wrong, so we need to change our ways. So that's lies can also be exposed through education. And system breakdown by itself is where you see, okay, every lie has two consequences. All right. The first consequence is that if the lie is successful, you will tell more lies in order to supposedly make the structure of your lies more strong. Actually, it can make your lie more sound more convincing, but it actually becomes more vulnerable. And I'll tell you what I mean. So in order to sort of, it's also surprising to know that every lie is difficult to remember the next time. So, for example, you told a lie 10 years ago, you won't even remember what you said because, again, as I said, it's inconsistent with reality, and that's how you know something called lies and deception exists. Is that you don't even remember what you said 10 years ago, and if you did, it's because you really care about preserving the system of lies. And right, that's what I mean is that it's difficult to keep track of how much lies you kept. And in order to hide those lies, you have to tell new lies in order to defend the ones you said before. So that makes the structure of your lies more and more vulnerable. So one day, if your if your lie breaks down, the whole structure just collapses. So that's the first thing. The second thing you want to remember is that other people will suffer the consequences of your lie unfairly. And I'll give you an example for that. Okay, so for example, there is a time period which your lies will sustain, it will live, right? So you got away with telling a lie to your parents or whatever that is, but during that time period, the people who actually, let's say, got influenced by your lie will act on that lie, and they will influence other people, and those people will influence the other people, and therefore all these structures now, at one point it becomes difficult to trace down, okay, who actually told this thing. All right, so but the thing you have to remember is that once you identify the truth, it's like you can, its whole system just collapses, right? It's as I mentioned, it becomes more vulnerable with time. All right, so, and the causes of distortion of facts, one of the reasons is identity politics. So what exactly is identity politics? So if, for example, the government in your place sort of creates schemes, plans, and sort of creates laws specifically for any specific identity as opposed to individuals. So everybody benefits from this scheme? No, it actually it benefits certain people belonging to some identity, people, religion, color, race, whatever that is. So identity politics is where politics is aimed at people belonging to any specific identities. So that's one of the causes, is that you try to benefit some identity, and therefore you try to distort the facts in order to make the people belonging to the identity not that bad. So commercial advantages is when, for example, a news media outlet sort of sees that when I manipulate facts, I'm going to get more eyeballs. And more eyeballs, basically, when I say eyeballs, I'm trying to say more visitors, more viewers, whatever that is. If I get more viewers, then I will be able to show more advertisement. And if I show more advertisement, I can influence people. And if I can influence people, I can make money, because advertisement is equal to money. Right, so it also happens because of socioeconomic conditions of the society, or the culture, or the individuals in your country. And what that means is, for example, people have nothing much to look back at or look forward to. When we talk about look back at, we're talking about identity crisis more specifically, but it could also mean other things. So what I mean by that is, when you don't have a job, it becomes difficult to sort of think about, higher pursuits, like especially if you think about North Korea. How do you think the dictatorship still survives? Because if you think about the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he created a pyramid where he talked about what the humans actually really want. And at the top most, we have something called self-actualization. But on the bottom things, we have basic things like food and water, shelter, social, belonging, and all those basic necessities. And at the top most is something called self-actualization, which is that the ultimate desire is to actually be able to do what we really want. That's the law of Abraham Maslow's law of hierarchy of needs. So he talks about that, right? So in that, you can understand, using that, I guess, the pyramid, you can understand why North Koreans could not protest against the dictatorship, because, well, they don't even have food to begin with. How are they going to protest about press freedom? Because that's not a pressing issue for those people at this time. So in order to sort of feed into in order to feel secure, and how do you feel secure? How do you try to make yourself, all of us want to make our situations better, right? We don't want to be in a situation of crisis. All of us want to make our situations better. And one of the ways you try to do it is you try to build situations of security around you. And the ultimate human desire, and you can even see this in animals like deers and in every animal that is eaten by predators, is you can see this in deers especially, is that we like to secure ourselves. The ultimate desire of a human is survival. We all want to be in a place where we are safe and secure. It's actually contrary to what a few conservatives might think, but Okay, so we'll talk about security and safety in another video because there's actually a dedicated video about it. Um, Status quo. So you basically want to fit inside the crowd. Everybody in your society is built around the system of deception, and therefore you're innocently a part of a society which sort of believes in that lie. And again, the status quo can be influenced because of this other thing, which is other people telling you a lie, and therefore you're believing it. And again, this is not a very, as I mentioned, not a very pressing issue in my opinion. Distortion of facts can be tackled, although it's not the thing that we can take lightly, because sometimes facts, as I said, look so real. And the reason why distortion of facts, again, I took so much time to explain that, is because there's something called deep fakes, which is basically, if for example I'm saying something in this video, people could actually take this video and put it to they can use artificial intelligence and machine learning using technologies like using deepfake. They could actually make a video where I'm saying what they want me to say. So they can using technology. You can create a video where I never actually said those words. You don't know if those words were real or not. So again, it also creates a complex situation where computers are able to, sort of tell what you really want. Okay, and if you are really interested in this, okay, if you want to know how deepfakes work, and if you want to see if deepfakes are even a thing, okay, I would suggest you to install this application, which I believe is called. Just give me a second here. I think it's called. I have this application on my system. Yeah, it's called Descript. Descript. You can go to this application, and basically what this application allows you to do is basically get the transcript of your podcast or video or audio. It will actually give you the text of whatever you said in the audio. For example, this video. Now, in this tool, Descript, you can actually edit the audios and videos by just replacing the text. And what the computer or the application would do is it would edit the video, and you would not even, like, for example, I said the word whatever that is. Now I can edit that video down. I can remove that as if it never existed. But not only that, I can replace that to something I never even said. And computer understands my voice, my pitch, my everything. And if I type the word, for example, I never said that, computer will actually take my voice and put that over there, replace that there. I mean, that's the beginning of, okay, computers are able to do those kinds of things today. So that's why distortion of facts is a big issue. But that's not all there is. There's also something called incomplete and inconsistent stories. Now, this is the bigger problem that you might think. It's that a lot of problems are identitarian in nature, which is that you say that, which is in order to feed into one specific narrative of people belong to one specific identity, you try to manipulate you try to tell stories that are half the truth. For example, you never say where it happened, how many people died, or whatever that is. You try to half figure the stories in order to do that. Some of these things could be ignorance. Some of this could be, as I mentioned, some of this could be innocent ignorance, and some of this could be motivated ignorance. Incomplete and inconsistent stories come from the desire of all of us humans to simplify everything. If something bad happened in a place, we try to say it's happened because the person belonged to this identity. It happened because of this. It could be because of that. I'm not saying denying the possibility, but I think it's important to remember the context we are in and try to understand to the relation of system, and try to understand, okay, so one of the possibilities is that he could be influenced because of his group or whatever. It also could be the possibility that because of his socioeconomic conditions, or possibly because of his neurological conditions, his medical conditions, that he's behaving in such a way. I mean, it could be a number of things. So that's what I mean, is that you need to understand that everything has the problems are incredibly complex. Solutions are the ones that need simplification, actually. So, one of the reasons why people become identitarians is because you believe in something called supremacy. Basically, your identity is better than anybody else's identity. It's not to say somebody's that you believe is what you believe is true or not. What I'm saying is your identity is better than anybody else's identity. So being true and better, not exactly are the same. Although it could mean that what's true is better. Yes, I mean obviously, but so when we talk about status, so how does supremacy creep in? So, how does we talk about things like white supremacy? No, I don't know, because again, there are people who are defending and trying to say that white supremacy doesn't exist. No, whether that exists or not. But again, my videos are solely about principles. If I use wrong examples, I'm really sorry about it, because my only purpose of using some examples are to try to get to the point. I might use wrong examples, and if I do that, I really apologize in advance. But the example, like I mean, the point of the reason why supremacy kicks in is because one of the reasons could be because of status quo. As I mentioned, you want to creep into, you want to be a part of a society, you want to be a part of a community, you want to be a part of a culture, you want to be a part of anything. You want to be, because it results in financial status. If you don't tell incomplete and inconsistent stories, if you don't try to gerrymander one specific system, if you don't try to become an identitarian, then you could lose your you will no longer be a part of a family, which is sad. It also could be because of social hierarchy, which is to say that you will be ranked higher in the society. You'll be regarded as someone higher because you serve the identity. But actually, I don't believe that's right, because if you tell the truth, if you always tell the truth, whether it results in what do you call it, in suffering of the people belonging to your identity or not, it will be in the best interest of the people around you. I think so, personally, and that's not just a perspective, because I can prove that using systems as well. But okay, anyways, supremacy could also happen because of corrupt structures in a monotheistic society. Now, there is a reason why I mentioned the word corrupt structure in a monotheistic society, because if you think about it, what monotheism really means is that you believe in the existence, not just existence. You believe. When I say believe here, I'm trying to say, I guess, yeah, believe. Okay, so you believe in the existence and the sayings of one authority. But if you think about it, supremacy is about putting yourself above anybody else. That includes putting yourself above the higher authority. Now, if you think that you're not below the higher authority, then that's not supremacy exactly. But again, the thing about, and again, that leads to complex arguments about, okay, if you believe that you are above the higher authority, you are not a monotheist, actually. So that's why I said it's a corrupt structure. Monotheistic societies can actually have a higher chances of resulting in corruption and supremacy. And the reason for this is because of something called because monotheistic societies are built on the premise that we believe in something called absolute truths. And I'm a monotheist, for example, is that there's the idea that there's something called absolute truth, as opposed to postmodernists who believe in something called relative truths. Everything is relative. It's everything about your perspective, right? So that's called that's called relative truths. Again, if you want an example of relative truths, is about something. If you believe something is wrong, it's because of the way you see it. It's not because of some absolute structure. There doesn't exist such thing as true meaning or whatever that is. So there's two things, which is absolute truth and relative truth. So monotheistic societies usually tend to go to have higher percentages. I mean, they have higher chances of becoming supremacists, and the reason for that is because sometimes it makes you think that you are better than anybody else, but you're not, because the highest authority is God. And yes, again, it also depends on what your God is. Again, that also depends. I'm not trying to preach religion here. I'm just trying to say what there is. Okay, so simplifying everything, we also want to understand what exactly is a compelling product. Okay, so for example, if you want to create a story that sort of if you want to make money, one of the things you can do is you can use some compelling keywords. Donald Trump and climate change. And for example, if you talk about India, we have Hindus and Muslims. If you talk about maybe there's so many keywords like this, right? So the controversial keywords. I don't know why I'm not able to come up with so many words like that, but there are so many keywords which will definitely are guaranteed to result in eyeballs, and that basically means a compelling product, a compelling story. So you can tell the story, and you can get more eyeballs, more advertisement, and more money, right? So that's incomplete and inconsistent stories. But as I told already, any sort of lies always results in a situation in two places. One is you have to tell more lies. Those lies are difficult to remember, by the way, and that's the proof to say that lies exist. And also three is that other people will act on that lies. The structure of lies become more vulnerable, and also when other people act on those lies, other people will trust you. They can result in loss of trust in relationships. People will not trust you anymore. That's another thing that you don't want. If you don't really care about them, and you think, okay, I don't really care about that. If you think about that, not only that, but the people that trusted you, they will act on that lie and sort of believe that. So it's not good for anybody, man. All right, so well, how is fake news widespread? It's one of the reasons is something called political polarization. Political polarization is a point where parties cannot negotiate and sort of understand each other. Everything is black and white. So you are so far into left, or so far into right, so far into authoritarianism, or into becoming an authoritarian, so far into being a um, a libertarian or an independent, that you don't want to look at the other side of perspective. So that's political polarization. And why look at other people's perspective? Well, you want to live with other people. It's not cultural appropriation. It's about living with other people. Because, I mean, political polarization also became an issue because of globalization. And again, globalization can be linked to so many different reasons. Like, we have more airline connectivity than ever before. We have more, and because of the internet, because of the language, because of the widespread of English as a language, more and more people from developed countries like India are moving to Western countries, and getting jobs over there. So a lot of issues do exist over there. So that's also a reason. Now, when we talk about political polarization, it could, one of the reasons could be because of globalization, as I mentioned. But it's most the most, I guess, the most important reason for political polarization is identity politics. All right, so let's talk about social networks, because social networks are one of the most important reasons why fake news are becoming, are becoming a bigger concern. Because social networks in the beginning used to be, especially Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, these kinds of networks used to be about connecting people with other people you already know, i.e., your friends, colleagues, and your your friends, your family, and your colleagues. But now it's becoming about connecting you with the outside world in the hopes to make this world a smaller place in order to facilitate more trade and connections. I mean, becoming a globalized place has a lot of benefits, right? So if you are becoming, for example, if you are becoming globalized, there are a lot of advantages of being together, right? Globalization has brought about a lot of advantages. One of the biggest advantages is that we're able to reach more people. Like, businesses are able to benefit so much more. Like, companies like Netflix, Spotify, or actually have a channel in India, right? Like, Spotify is based in Sweden, Netflix is based in US, but they have exclusive shows for India, and that's because of, come on, internet is one of the one of the reasons why sort of this happened, right? So social networks is one of the most influential carriers of fake news. So how did this happen? It came from the desire that we want to make this world a smaller place. You want to connect with people that you don't really know. Now, I am a UX designer, and we work on social products a lot, like a lot of digital applications that are social networks, right? And one of the one of the most difficult tasks we have is connecting with people you don't really know. So how can we match you with content and people you don't really know in real life? Now, for example, you have your friend at school and you want to talk to him. It's easy because you already know that person. You can ask his identity, and the application just connects you with that person. So the application doesn't have any job to connect with anybody. It's just about, just facilitating a means, right? But today, a bigger task of social networks is not just to help you connect with people you already know, but to connect with brands, ideas, and identities that you don't really know exactly. And the way it does that is using by understanding you. How can it understand you? Well, we're not talking about understanding basic facts like where you're from, what are you doing exactly, or when you were born, or all these kinds of information. Computer wants to understand you in the deepest sense of the word, in that it want to understand your philosophy, your what you like, what your preferences, your personality, and all those things. Because so what happens is we have something called machine learning, which is a branch of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, as the word describes, is trying to mimic the human intelligence. It is trying to say, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna understand what this person does, and we're gonna serve advertisements that are more relevant to this person. So what we do is we are in artificial intelligence using machine learning and using some branch of technologies like natural language processing or computer vision. So basically, these are technologies that computers can understand what is there in the image, what is there in the in the language, what is there in the words that you type. It's trying to understand your actions, your input, and then it's trying to build a profile. Okay, so this person is that, this person is this. It's building a system is what I am trying to say. It's like it's trying to build a system, and it's trying to make stronger connections. With more time, more data you have, the more you can sort of predict. So the thing about artificial intelligence is that they're never 100% precise. It's about the probability. Okay, like for example, when you show a computer the image of, let's say, this mouse, if I show this mouse here, the computer might predict it's a mouse. But the way it's able to do that is by giving it more data, and you're training the system and saying this is mouse. And if you want to understand in depth, it's trying to map the coordinates and colors and so on and so forth. There's so many different parameters, but fundamentally, you're teaching the system to identify this is mouse, this is apple. But sometimes they can make a mistake of identifying this as an apple, because I don't know, there are probably black apples someplace. I don't know, just saying an example, but there are so many. You can also identify this as a phone, but it isn't a phone, right? So the point I'm trying to get across is that artificial intelligence are not really precise, but what they do is they try to predict what you might like. So when, as a process of doing that, one of the things that will happen is that they will connect you with people you don't really know and people you shouldn't be really connecting with. So that's why, your parents say that internet is dangerous for kids, but because you don't really know who to trust and who not to trust, right? So better be careful out there, kids. So that's because, again, computers can connect you with people you don't really and shouldn't really do anything with. Okay, internet news channels. All right, so what does that mean? Internet news channels is, well, internet news channels actually are influenced by social networks. So if, for example, a politician says says something on Twitter, this news channel try to take the tweets there and try to interpret what these news channels could mean. So what this person said, he tweeted this, he endorsed this person, therefore he's da 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 da. So they try to manipulate and analyze different facts, right? So that's also the thing. Some of these news channels can come from traditional media outlets. So these are historically TV channels, or they started off as a website. They can be either of those, right? So that's how fake news is widespread. Now let's try to understand one of the places that it all leads us to, which is identity politics. So as I already mentioned, identity politics is where a politics or the politics in a country is specifically aimed based on people's identity and not based on individuals or based on any other thing. So one of the reasons why identity politics is becoming a bigger issue. Now, it's important to remember that not every time is identity politics wrong, because I need to get a couple of things right. First of all, your identity matters, okay? It does matter. It does matter who you are, but when it comes to politics, it shouldn't be all that there is, right? Everything is about, okay, if you belong to this specific identity, then I will do that because you are corrupt, you are this, you are that. That can lead to misinformation, because you can be driving on misinformation, because sometimes you may be thinking that this person is this because of his identity, but well, it couldn't be because of his identity. All right, so because social networks, as the word describes, is about people, right? So it's about, okay, so this person is going to these places and therefore he's a rich person and therefore he comes from this identity and this is all that there is to this person. While people are influenced by their environment. It's always important to remember that, because that's why social networks do not represent the actual truth, because they are disconnected from the broader system. And that's why it's sort of difficult to trust strangers. Now, identity politics. One of the things identity politics is doing these days, one of the major places, is it's also because of crony capitalism as well. Well, a bunch of people basically hire people, and the money basically flows amongst the highest authorities, which is the bureaucrats, right? So it's just like it's a corruption of society where only the few become the richest, and then you have the poorest and the poor. So basically, bureaucrats, so who are bureaucrats? People who you didn't really want to work for, or people you don't really work for, but they are making decisions on your behalf. So crony capitalism is where people you don't want are being benefited, right? So that's crony capitalism. Now, talk about political polarization, which is the destination where social networks these days lead us to with identity politics. Is political polarization can come as a result of two reasons. Okay, one is your solely commercial advantage, or they can also be because of climbing up the social hierarchy. The commercial advantage is when a news channel or news outlet or news publisher is directly funded by a political party. It could also mean affiliation with another party. So what I mean by political affiliation and inherited bias is where a person was always looking forward to partnering with this political party. It was just waiting for this opportunity, and then they finally said, "Oh, listen, if you peddle this news, we will give you money. What do you say?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, of course. I was always waiting for this opportunity." So it could also be motivated, right? So motivated is more like, okay, you are resulting in identity crisis. Now, identity crisis, we'll talk about in a minute here when we come to this part here. But over here, basically, what we're trying to say is that when you belong to a specific identity and you are not being represented in a positive, or not necessarily positive, but in any light for that matter, if you're not getting enough attention, if you are a part of the society, if you are significant in number, if you're not being represented, if you're not being given rights or whatever that is because of your identity, and that can result in a situation called identity crisis. Why is my identity like, I was born to this, to this society, is I mean, I don't see anything wrong with it, and why are people basically just throwing stones at me for no reason, right? It's like, I see something inconsistent, so that results in identity crisis, in that I think I'm in the wrong place, right? I'm the wrong person. I'm not in the right place. I don't think there's anything to this life, and that results in something called nihilism, and then that comes as a result of deconstruction, which will come from social isolation, which is also the other reason for motivation, is that people can be affiliated to other parties because of social isolation. What I mean by that is that when you are alone and you don't have any friends, you all want to be, again, the fundamental desire of every human being is to have survival. We want to all be safe and secure, right? So when we all want to be safe and secure, one of the things is, when we think about social isolation, you don't want to be left in a place, in a place and situation where you are alone physically, emotionally, in all the different senses, in that sense. So that's why you want to have somebody you want to talk to, relate to, and all that. So that's why social isolation is a big problem. That's why it could also. That's when political parties can tell you, "Hey, let's be friends," right? Political party funded is more like party straight away funds you to peddle that news, man. So that's more like directly and indirectly, and that leads to gerrymandering of the system. It's like, we'll pay you $100 if you basically peddle this commercial for like 10 times a day. Let's do something else. Let's do bigger budget. So the more money you get, it basically benefits your family. So I mean, money is not an unimportant thing, which is usually money is looked at as an enemy. It's like, no, I mean, money basically drives societies. But that's what I'm trying to say, is the reason why the thing that you're able to feed your families, so there are obviously commercial advantages, but again, that results in more complex problems that you never even thought of. As I mentioned, that's why it's commercial. You have commercial advantage with political polarization. It could also mean because you want to climb up the social hierarchy. So as I mentioned, in a society you have something that was regarded as a higher being, who was not so regarded and is not given respect at all. And again, so climbing up, the desire to climb up the social hierarchy can happen because of a phobia of exclusion, or it could also be because of societal misunderstanding or social pressure. In that, people sort of think, I'm underrepresented by the society, or this could also happen because of people thinking, listen, my life has no meaning, I have no purpose, so I might as well go wreck other people's lives as well. It could also happen because of that. It could also happen because, well, listen, it is because I am being excluded in every part of the society and people are being misunderstood. Listen to my story, alright? So that's the kind of societal pressure that everybody says, listen, you have to do this, you have to talk because you have to talk. I mean, why do you have to talk all the time, right? So only when you have something to say you can talk, and not everybody wants to talk. Alright, so that we'll get to later. Alright, so when we talk about phobia of exclusion, we talk about gerrymandering, which is to say that when you're being afraid of excluded from the society, one of the things you'll do is you'll gerrymander the system in a way that you'll try to you'll dilute everybody into making yourself look precious in the eyes of your group, right? And that results in identity crisis. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what it leads to. It can also lead to commercial advantages, as I mentioned, is where you can make more money, or you can, make not just money, but sometimes attention. It's like, you can get more attention, money, by changing the whole system in order to, get what you want exactly, right? So not without thinking about the system, right? So again, the system is not designed. If you think about the balance, right? If you probe it down to the very beginning of time, when we all thought about when the barter system existed, when the barter money when money was invented, one of the things that we can all ask, one of the things that we can all ask is, okay, when money was let's say invented, when money was started, we all thought, okay, let's have a lot of money, and then we'll think about what you can do with the money. And then that resulted in a situation where a lot of people are like, okay, I have so much money, I don't know what to do with it, right? And but there was a point in time we could have consciously started thinking, why do I need this money? How much money do I need to have in order to be happy? Because there is a point, and there's a time, and there's a situation where you can think any money beyond this, any amount of money beyond this point is unnecessary. It's unhealthy because that money has to be someone else's. Oh, maybe it has to be. It shouldn't be in my possession because maybe it's not right for me. And that's when you have to think about it and say, you know what, I'm going to take a back seat here. So identity crisis also happens with gerrymandering the system. Okay, gerrymandering is when you try to when your identity, as I said, is being represented. So it is being misrepresented. So, for example, minority representation. So people are telling you that you're wrong, or people don't even acknowledge in the first place. So that's minority representation. You want to be represented in the society, and that's why you have something called, you try to gerrymander the whole system in order to feed your narrative, and that results, as I said, in a bigger problem. And you also have social isolation. Social isolation, one of the things that can happen as a result of social isolation, that can happen as a result of social isolation is deconstruction. Now, deconstruction is the opposite of what we're doing, okay? So we're doing construction here. We're trying to construct meaning out of what is fake news. We're trying to understand fake news. We're trying to construct facts. We're trying to identify different things that can be hindering our thing. Identifying obstacles, identifying advantages, identifying opportunities, identifying problems. All of these different, entities. But that's not all there is, right? So social isolation or deconstruction is where you say there is where you basically deconstruct, and you get to a point, you remove all these points, because there's a way you can actually say that this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make any sense, by deconstructing. And the point of deconstructing is to get to a point where there is no bias. Now, that can be a tempting position where you can get to a point where you are not influenced by anybody. Well, actually, as I mentioned in my last video, that's why I think nihilism is wrong, is because you play around a set of hypotheses and assumptions. Your nihilistic idea is basically built around a premise or hypothesis that isn't consistent with other facts. How do you know something is true? How do you tell if a story is true? Well, you tell a story is true if you can, for example, take that fact and put it in the situation that the person is saying that the fact is, and seeing, okay, that's whether or not you like the story or not, that's different. It's like whether that you think that's pleasing or not, that's not really the matter. You see if the situation fits the other facts. Okay, Now that's not there is. Now you have to also see how does this. It's more like, okay, this USB cable right here. If you plug it inside a system and if this port doesn't support it, then this is inconsistent. This is the wrong port. The manufacturer gave me a wrong port. If I put this into a system and this fit it right inside, it has to just click. It has to, click right there. So that clicking is by understanding the full system. So that's why in opposite to deconstruction we have something called rationalism. And this is not rationalism. I shouldn't have used the word rationalism. I should have used the word reductive thinking. I think I will rename it right now so you guys don't get confused here. So it's reductive thinking. And the reason is because when you think about reductive thinking, what is reductive thinking? Reductive thinking is where you take a fact and you break it down into units and try to understand different units and try to constitute meaning. That's also one of the reasons that's facilitating deconstruction also in a way, because what's happening in reductive thinking is that you're learning about facts in isolation. You have to learn about facts with their context, environment, and their relationships. That's how you understand and make sense out of things. And that's why reductive thinking can lead to a place where you're tremendously knowledgeable in one domain, and you can try to restructure and reestablish societies in ways that are inconsistent with the reality or the balanced loop of a system. When we talk about systems thinking, we talked about something called balanced loop, right? So balanced loop is where there is, okay, you have an advantage. Let's say, for example, there is a structure that sort of benefits you, but there is also another system that sort of brings that thing into balance so that you don't end up, so you have an advantage, it doesn't hurt other people. Okay, how does it happen? So when you take a decision, it doesn't hurt your children or people you never thought of. So that's called a balanced loop, is what we're talking about here. So when we talk about reductive thinking, we're learning only about entities, but we're forgetting its relationships and where it belongs to. So we have to study systems with where it belongs. Okay, now where does political polarization really leads us to? It leads us to power politics, in the places where everything is about, if you give me power, I will do everything for you. So that results in extreme ideologies, communism, and some deadly ideologies, which basically are built out of power. Like everything is about power. So the politicians don't do really anything. It's just about bureaucrats and crony capitalism, and all these things has become prevalent in the societies. You also have something called no negotiations and mediators or discussions. As I mentioned at the beginning, there is no discussion, there is no something as negotiation. You can't really talk to people. It's just about people. Let's just go on a war with each other. All right, so that's and identity politics can also happen as a result of war and social conflicts. So when we talk about wars and social conflicts, we have all. I mean, America has faced some. We in the past we had slavery, we have racism even now, but we had slavery and all those issues, right? So slavery became an issue with immigration becoming more prevalent, and immigration became a thing, especially because in the countries. And again, if you look into the history of Africa, I'm really sorry if any of my viewers are from Africa, and if you're getting offended, because I really mean no ill for for Africa at all. But what I'm trying to say when I say immigration, if you historically look into Africa, Africa was a very rich country. Like, I'm not trying to please anybody here, but if you look into the history. We all started off being a balanced society, right? All of us had enough equal amount of money, so we all had to, sort of live together. But we gerrymandered the system in a way that sort of fed only our narrative, and in a way that sort of, the corrupted other systems, right? So identitarian intolerance is where you don't want to tolerate any identity, not ideas, identity. Remember that. Okay, so you also mean better financial stability. So people come to identitarian because in the places where they are, because of the identitarian, because of their race, because of the language, because of the social class, like for example, in India we have a class system. So you have well, people are being intolerant because of your identity. So people come to other countries to be prosperous. It also People could also come because of better financial stability, so you can make more money here as opposed to there, and also because of the place that you're immigrating to seems to have a better ideology or philosophy than where I am coming from. Slavery is also a reason why why the social conflicts happen. It's like us versus them thing. Now, all right, so that's identity politics. Now I want to finish this with one last point here. So just so I'm clear with, so what is the solution to all this? And before I get to the solution, I want to make it clear. It's not really clear that everything has to do with identity politics. The problem is like, it's only about identity. It's like identity is it's not wrong. As I mentioned, it's important to have identity. It's important to know who you are. But when you're creating, when it comes to politics, when it comes to societies, when it comes to organizing societies, when it comes to governing societies, it is incredibly important that you understand individuals not according to how their identity, but you understand systems, how they come from, where they come from. Like we identified the system here, but maybe in the future we will try to understand. I'll create a 2.0 of fake news, so we can create a better model, more sophisticated model of how fake news is proliferated and how we can tackle this. So what's the solution to the problem? The solution to this problem is to understand how to identify truth. And the way you can identify truth is by using systems thinking, is by understanding something called balanced loop. Is what you're doing balanced or not? Is the fact that you're saying, is it true in different angles, different dimensions? So now this is something that I often say when people say, what do you mean by fit in different perspectives? So what does that mean? Does it mean that anything that is negatively related, is that wrong? No. If it is related, it's correct. Okay, so what I mean by that is, for example, there are people who we consciously choose to not speak with in the best interest of creating something called a balanced loop. Because if I speak with this person, or if I form an alliance with this person, it's going to result in a lot of more problems than it's going to create benefits. That's called that's an example of negative relationships. In systems thinking, it's not about whether a relationship is positive or negative. It can be positive or negative. They can be negatively or positively related. But the fact that I choose not to speak with the specific person in the best interest of creating a balanced loop is also a relationship. So a better way to understand this is you always need to try to understand and create better, more sophisticated pictures and more big picture thinking. In that, okay, maybe what are the variables I need to think about? Why did this event happen? Okay, something happened. All right, fine. What does this person want to do? Okay, each person wants to do this. But he also wants to do this, but this doesn't fit this. So what does that mean? Why is he saying this? All right, well, because of this, or because of his identity, because his identity says this. Okay. So